Captain Jake Morrison stared at the stars through the main window of his ship. The U's horizon moved slowly through space, scanning planets and moons in the Kepler 442 system. It was routine work, the kind that made some crew members fall asleep at their posts. Jake had been doing this job for 15 years, and he knew every sound his ship made. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. Lisa Brooks, his chief engineer, was checking power levels on her screen. Danny Rodriguez sat at the communications station, listening to the usual space chatter. Amy Carter, the security chief, was reading reports from the outer colonies. They were a good crew, Jake thought. Not the best in the fleet, but good enough. Captain, we're getting something strange, Danny said suddenly. His voice cut through the peaceful silence like a knife. Jake turned around. What kind of strange? It's a distress signal, but it's very weak. And it's coming from way out there. Danny pointed toward the edge of the star system. The signal is breaking up badly. I can barely make out the words. Put it on the main speakers, Jake ordered. The bridge filled with static and crackling sounds. Through the noise, they could hear a voice speaking in the common galactic language. The voice sounded desperate and frightened. Please ... anyone? The Devourers have returned. Our defenses are falling. Children dying ... need help. Coordinates attached. Nothing but static. The crew looked at each other in shock. Lisa was the first to speak. Did that voice say Devourers? That's what I heard, Amy said. But who are the Devourers? Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Danny, can you clean up that signal? Make it clearer? Danny's fingers flew over his controls. I'm trying, Captain. The signal is very old and weak. It traveled a long way to reach us. He worked for several minutes, sweat forming on his forehead. There, that's the best I can do. The voice came through again, still crackling, but clearer now. This is Admiral Kethver of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. Please, anyone who receives this message, the Devourers have returned to our galaxy. Our homeworld is under attack. Our defenses are falling. Millions of our people are dying. We have children who need to be saved. Please, we need help. Coordinates are attached to this message. Jake felt his heart race. The Zephyrians were one of the oldest and most advanced species in the galaxy. They had been around for 50,000 years. Their technology was so advanced that most other species could barely understand it. If they were calling for help, the situation had to be terrible. Lisa, check those coordinates, Jake ordered. Lisa pulled up the navigation system. Captain, these coordinates are deep in Zephyrian space. That's at least 2 weeks' travel from here, even at maximum speed. Amy, what do you know about the Zephyrians? Amy accessed her security files. They're one of the founding members of the Galactic Federation, very peaceful people. They've never started a war in their entire history. They help other species develop technology and medicine. They're basically the good guys of the galaxy. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians had helped humanity join the Federation 200 years ago. When other species said humans were too young and dangerous, the Zephyrians spoke up for them. They shared medical technology that saved millions of human lives. They were friends. Danny, send this message to Federation Command immediately. Use the emergency channel. Already on it, Captain. Jake paced around the bridge while they waited for a response. The Zephyrians were in trouble, and they needed help. But Jake's ship was just a small exploration vessel. They had some weapons, but nothing that could fight a real war. 2 hours later, the response came from Admiral Helen Price, the highest-ranking human in the Federation military. Her face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired and worried. Captain Morrison, we received your report. The Federation Council is meeting right now to discuss the situation. Admiral, shouldn't we be heading to help them? Jake asked. Hold your position, Captain. That's an order. We need to wait for the Council's decision. Jake wanted to argue, but orders were orders. He told his crew to maintain their position and... Wait, 6 hours passed. Finally, Admiral Price contacted them again. This time she looked angry. Captain Morrison, I have the Council's decision. The Zephyrian homeworld is too far away from Federation space. The enemy is unknown and potentially Very dangerous. The Council has voted to establish a quarantine zone around Zephyrian space. No Federation ships are to enter that area. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. Admiral, are you saying we're not going to help them? The Council believes that sending ships would be a waste of resources and lives. Council leader Vorthik specifically stated that humanity lacks the firepower to make any difference. We would only be throwing away lives for nothing. But Admiral, these are the Zephyrians. They helped us join the Federation. They've been our friends for 200 years. Admiral Price's expression softened slightly. I know, Captain. But the decision is made. Your orders are to maintain the quarantine line and make sure no ships enter Zephyrian space. The Federation is more concerned with protecting the core worlds. The communication ended, leaving Jake and his crew in stunned silence. Captain, Lisa said quietly, are we really going to abandon them? Jake looked at his crew. These were good people, humans who understood right from wrong. They had families back on Earth in the colonies. They knew what it meant to help others. Denny, send a personal message to my wife on Earth. Tell her I love her. And send copies of everything we've learned to every human colony and military base. Captain, what are you doing? Amy asked. I'm making sure people know what's happening. The Federation might be willing to let the Zephyrians die, but maybe humans won't be. Over the next few days, Jake's message spread throughout human space. The reaction was immediate and powerful. Colonists held protests. Military officers resigned from Federation commands. Politicians on Earth demanded answers. Jake received hundreds of messages from other human ships. Many were asking the same question. Are we really going to let our friends die? The answer came from an unexpected source. President Carolyn Webb of Earth sent a personal message to Jake. Captain Morrison, your report has reached the highest levels of human government. I want you to know that humanity has not forgotten our friends. Help is coming. Jake felt hope for the first time in days. Maybe the Federation was willing to abandon the Zephyrians, but humans were different. Humans remembered their friends. Humans didn't leave people to die when they could help. He looked at his crew, who had been listening to the President's message. They were smiling for the first time since receiving the distress signal. Danny, monitor all human military frequencies. I have a feeling things are about to change. Yes, Captain. And Captain? What is it, Danny? I'm proud to be human right now, Jake nodded. So am I, Danny, so am I. Outside the ship, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere among them, the Zephyrians were fighting and dying. But help was coming, human help. Because humans didn't abandon their friends, no matter what the cost. The Federation had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. President Carolyn Webb stood in the emergency meeting room deep inside the government building on Earth. The room was filled with the most important people in human space. Admiral Helen Price sat at the large table, her uniform wrinkled from traveling all night. General Ryan Baker, head of all human military forces, was studying reports on his tablet. Dr. Martin Cross, Earth's top expert on alien species, had dark circles under his eyes from staying up all night reading about the Zephyrians. Tell me again what we know, President Webb said. Admiral Price cleared her throat. The Zephyrians are under attack by something called the Devourers. We don't know much about this enemy, but they're powerful enough to threaten a species that has survived for 50,000 years. And the Federation won't help? Asked General Baker. The Federation Council voted to abandon them. They say it's too dangerous and too far away. They want to use Zephyrian space as a buffer zone to study. The enemy, President Webb felt anger rise in her chest. A buffer zone? They're going to let an entire civilization die so they can learn about the enemy. Dr. Cross looked up from his notes. Madam President, you need to understand what the Zephyrians mean to the galaxy. In 50,000 years, they have never started a war. They have never enslaved another species. They have never committed genocide. They spend their time helping younger species grow and develop. They helped us, Admiral Price added. When we first applied to join the Federation, most species said we were too young and too violent. The Zephyrians spoke up for us. They said, Humans had potential for good. They shared their medical technology with us, Dr. Cross continued. That technology saved millions of human lives during the plague of 2298. They asked for nothing in return. President Webb walked to the window and looked out at the city below. People were going about their normal lives, not knowing that their friends across the galaxy were dying. What kind of enemy are we talking about? General Baker activated a holographic display. Our intelligence agents have been gathering information. The Devourers are not from our galaxy. They come from somewhere else, somewhere far away. They don't just conquer planets, they consume them completely. What does that mean? President Webb asked. They eat everything, all life, all energy, all matter. They leave behind empty space. Our agents report that they have already consumed 3 star systems on the edge of Zephyrian space. Those systems are now completely empty. No planets, no stars, nothing. The room fell silent. President Webb felt a chill run down her spine. This was not just war. This was the complete destruction of everything. They also do something else, Dr. Cross said quietly. They corrupt what they touch. They take the dead and make them fight for their side. They turn planets into twisted versions of themselves. They spread like a disease across space. Admiral Price leaned forward. Madam President, the Federation is scared. They think the Devourers are too powerful to fight. They want to pull back all their forces and build defenses around the core worlds. And leave everyone else to die, General Baker added. President Webb turned back to face the room. How long do the Zephyrians have? Based on their last transmission, maybe 2 weeks. Maybe less, Admiral Price said. And how long would it take? Our fleet to reach them? General Baker checked his calculations. If we send everything we have, and if we push our ships to maximum speed, we could be there in 10 days. Everything we have, President Webb repeated. What does that mean exactly? Every ship in the human fleet. Every battleship, every cruiser, every fighter. We would have to pull ships from every colony, every defense post, every patrol route. We would be leaving human space completely undefended. And if we did that, would we have enough firepower to make a difference? The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, General Baker spoke. I don't know, Madam President. The Zephyrians have technology far beyond ours. If they can't stop this enemy, I'm not sure we can either. But we might be able to buy them time, Admiral Price said. We might be able to help them evacuate their people. We might be able to save some lives. President Webb sat down at the head of the table. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. The Federation, which includes species with technology and weapons far superior to ours, has decided not to help the Zephyrians. They think it's hopeless. That's correct, Admiral Price said. And if we go, we'll be going alone. No Federation? Support, no reinforcements, just us, yes, Madam President. And we'll be risking our entire fleet and possibly the defense of human space. Yes, President Webb looked around the table at each person. These were the leaders of humanity, the people who made the hard decisions. They were waiting for her to decide the fate of their species. Dr. Cross, in your professional opinion, what kind of people are the Zephyrians? Dr. Cross didn't hesitate. They are the best people in the galaxy, Madam President. If there is such a thing as a truly good species, it's them. And they helped us when we needed it. They did more than help us. They saved us. Without their support, we would never have joined the Federation. We would still be stuck in our own solar system. President Webb stood up. Then the decision is easy. Everyone in the room looked at her. We're going to help them. Admiral Price leaned forward. Madam President, are you sure? This could be the end of humanity. We could lose everything. Admiral, let me ask you something. If we don't help our friends when they need us, what kind of people are we? But the risks, Don't understand the risks. But I also understand who we are. We are humans. We don't abandon our friends. We don't let good people die when we can help them. General Baker nodded slowly. I agree with the President. If we let the Zephyrians die, we're no better than the Federation Council. Dr. Cross spoke up. There's something else to consider. If the Devourers consume the Zephyrians, they'll be stronger. They'll have more resources, more knowledge. Eventually, they'll come for us anyway. President Webb walked back to the window. How soon can we mobilize the fleet? Give me 3 days, General Baker said. I'll need to contact every human colony and military base. Some ships are very far away. Do it. Send the message to every human commander in space. Tell them we're going to save our friends. Admiral Price stood up. Madam President, I want to lead this mission personally. Are you sure, Admiral? The Zephyrians deserve our best? I've been fighting for humanity for 30 years. This is the most important battle I'll ever fight. President Webb nodded. Then take the flag, take our best ship and our best people. Think. You, Madam President. As the meeting ended, President Webb remained at the window. In 3 days, the largest fleet in human history would leave for Zephyrian space. They would be going into the unknown, facing an enemy that had already destroyed entire star systems, but they would be going as humans. And humans didn't abandon. Their friends outside, the sun was setting over Earth. Soon, that same sun would shine on empty space as every human ship headed toward the stars. Humanity was about to risk everything for the simple principle that good people deserve to be. Helped, President Webb smiled. She was proud to be human. Admiral Helen Price stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the largest fleet in human history move through space. 2,000 ships stretched out in all directions, their lights twinkling like stars against the darkness. She had never seen anything like it. No human had. Admiral, we're receiving the final count from all battle groups, reported Commander Steve Harrison, her logistics officer. 2,047 ships total. Every human colony contributed something. Admiral. Price nodded. The fleet was impressive, but she knew it was also desperate. Every military ship in human space was here. Every training vessel from the academies. Even civilian transports had been fitted with whatever weapons could be found. If they failed, humanity would be defenseless. Captain Nancy Ford reporting from Fighter Squadron Alpha, came a voice over the communications. We have 400 fighters ready for combat. Dr. Kevin right here from the medical ships, another voice said. We have 30 hospital ships prepared for casualties. Admiral Price looked at the star map on her screen. They were still 3 days away from Zephyrian space. 3 days to prepare for a battle that would decide the fate of an entire species. Admiral, we're getting reports from refugee ships, Commander Harrison said. They're fleeing from Zephyrian space. Should we stop them? Yes, we need to know what we're facing. The first refugee ship they encountered was barely holding together. Its hull was damaged and scorched. Admiral Price contacted the ship directly. This is Admiral Price of the human fleet. Can you tell us what's happening in Zephyrian space? The alien captain appeared on screen. He was from a species called the Kelphins, known for their bravery in battle, but now he looked terrified. Human Admiral, you must turn back. The Devourers are not like any enemy you can imagine. They don't just kill. They corrupt everything they touch. Tell me what you saw, Admiral Price said. The Kelphin captain's hands shook as he spoke. I watched them attack the planet Zephyria Beta. They didn't use normal weapons. They used living ships that looked like they were made of flesh and metal mixed together. When they touched the planet's surface, the ground itself came alive and attacked the defenders. What happened to the people? The ones who died were the lucky ones. The Devourers took the bodies and made them fight for their side. I saw Zephyrian soldiers attacking their own families. I saw children turned into monsters. Admiral Price felt sick. How many ships do they have? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. And they're all connected somehow. When you attack one, all the others know instantly. After the Kelphin ship left, Admiral Price called a meeting of her senior officers. The conference room was filled with the best military minds humanity had to offer. You all heard the report, she said. We're not just fighting an enemy. We're fighting something that turns our friends into weapons against us. Captain Nancy Ford spoke first. Admiral, our fighters are fast and well trained. But if the enemy can instantly coordinate thousands of ships, we're going to need new tactics. What do you suggest? We can't fight them like we would fight normal enemies. We need to be unpredictable. We need to hit them in ways they don't expect. Commander Harrison pulled up tactical displays. Our ships are not as advanced as Zephyrian technology, but we have something they don't. We're human. We adapt quickly. We take risks that other species won't take. Dr. Wright looked worried. What about the corruption? If they can turn our own people against us, how do we fight that? We don't let them take our people alive, Admiral Price said grimly. It's better to die fighting than to be turned into a weapon. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message from the communications officer. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld. Admiral Price hurried back to the bridge. The transmission was weak and filled with static. The image showed a Zephyrian officer in damaged armor. This is Admiral Kethver of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. To any Federation ships receiving this message, our situation is desperate. Zephyria Prime is under direct attack. Our orbital defenses are failing. We estimate we have less than 1 day before the planet falls. The image flickered and showed the space around the Zephyrian homeworld. Admiral Price gasped. The beautiful planet was surrounded by dark, twisted ships that seemed to move like living things. The famous crystal cities of Zephyria Prime were cracked and burning. Admiral Kethver, this is Admiral Helen Price of the Human Fleet. We're coming to help you. There was a long pause. When the Zephyrian Admiral spoke again, his voice was filled with disbelief. Human Admiral, did you say the Human Fleet? But the Federation ordered all ships to stay away. We're not here as part of the Federation, we're here as humans. And humans don't abandon their friends. Admiral Kethver's ancient eyes filled with tears. You came. After 50,000 years, I thought I had seen everything. But you came. Hold on, Admiral. We'll be there in 6 hours. The human fleet pushed their engines to maximum speed. As they approached the Zephyrian system, they could see the battle raging in space. The Devourers had surrounded the planet with their dark ships. Zephyrian vessels, beautiful and graceful, were fighting desperately against enemies that looked like nightmares. All ships, this is Admiral Price, we're going in. Remember, we're not just fighting for the Zephyrians. We're fighting for the principle that good people should never stand alone. The battle began immediately. The Devourers launched waves of biomechanical ships toward the human fleet. These ships moved in ways that seemed impossible, twisting and turning through space like living creatures. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Turner led the first attack. His ship, the UES Courage, dove straight into the enemy formation. All ships, follow my lead. We're going to show them what humans can do. The human ships attacked with a fury that surprised even themselves. Where other species might have used careful formations and predictable tactics, the humans adapted and improvised. When their normal weapons proved ineffective, they rammed enemy ships. When their shields failed, they used their ships as weapons. Engineer Sandra Kim, working on a civilian transport that had been converted into a weapons platform, made quick modifications to her ship's systems. Captain, I've figured out how to overload our power cores. If we get close enough to one of their big ships, we can take it with us. Do it, her captain replied. The sacrifice of Sandra's ship destroyed a massive Devourer vessel and created a gap in their formation. The Zephyrians, inspired by human courage, pushed through the gap and began their own counterattack. Admiral Price watched the battle from her command center. Human ships were being destroyed, but they were making a difference. The Devourers had never faced an enemy that fought with such desperate courage. Admiral, Commander Harrison reported, we've lost 300 ships, but we've broken their outer defensive line. The Zephyrians are beginning to evacuate their most important facilities. Good, signal all ships. We're going to hold this line no matter what it costs. The battle raged for hours. Human fighters, led by Captain Ford, dove between the larger ships, attacking the Devourer's coordination systems. Human engineers found ways to disrupt the enemy's ability to communicate. Human doctors worked desperately to save the wounded Dot as the sun set on Zephyr Prime. Admiral Price realized they had done something impossible. They had stopped the Devourers. For the first time in the invasion, the enemy had been forced to retreat. Admiral Kethver, this is Admiral Price. The immediate threat to your homeworld has been stopped. Admiral Price, your species has saved us. We will never forget this. Admiral Price looked out at the stars, now filled with both human and Zephyrian ships working together. We're not done yet, Admiral. We're going to end this threat once and for all. The battle for Zephyr Prime had been raging for 3 days. Admiral Helen Price stood in the damaged command center of the UES Defiance, watching the tactical display with tired eyes. Half of the human fleet was gone. Destroyed ships floated in space like broken toys. But they were still fighting. Admiral, we're getting casualty reports from all sectors, Commander Steve Harrison said. His voice was hoarse from giving orders for 3 straight days. We've lost over 1,000 ships. The medical stations are overwhelmed. Admiral Price nodded. The cost was terrible, but they were holding the line. The Zephyrians had managed to evacuate most of their civilians from the planet's surface. Millions of lives had been saved. What's the status of the enemy fleet? She asked. They've pulled back to regroup, but our scouts report they're bringing in reinforcements. Big ones. Captain Nancy Ford's voice crackled over the communications. Admiral, our fighter pilots are exhausted. We've been flying non-stop missions, but morale is still high. The pilots know what we're fighting for. Admiral Price admired the courage of her people. They were fighting an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat, but they never gave up. That was what made them human. Admiral Price, this is Dr. Elena Martinez calling from the science ship, came a new voice. I'm working with the Zephyrian research team. We may have found something important. What kind of something, Doctor? We need to meet in person. It's too important to discuss over open communications. An hour later, Admiral Price met with Dr. Martinez and a group of Zephyrian scientists on the research station orbiting the planet. Dr. Martinez was a young woman who specialized in studying alien technology. She looked excited but tired. Admiral, we've been studying the wreckage from destroyed Devourer ships, Dr. Martinez said. We've discovered something incredible about how they work. The lead Zephyrian scientist, an elderly being named Veltar, activated a holographic display. These creatures are not truly alive, but they are not machines either. They exist in a state between life and death. What does that mean? Admiral Price asked. They are controlled by a hive mind, Dr. Martinez explained. All of their ships are connected through a special kind of energy field. When one ship learns something, all the other ships know it instantly. We already suspected that. It's why they coordinate so well. Yes, but Admiral, we found their weakness, Veltar said. The connection between their ships uses a specific frequency of electromagnetic energy. If we can disrupt that frequency, we can break their coordination. Admiral Price felt hope for the first time in days. Can we generate this frequency? We can, Dr. Martinez said. The Zephyrians have the technology to create powerful electromagnetic pulse devices. But there's a problem. What kind of problem? Veltar looked sad. The devices must be placed very close to the enemy ships to work. Someone would have to fly directly into their formation and activate the devices manually. A suicide mission? Admiral Price said quietly. Yes, the electromagnetic pulse would disable our own ships as well. Anyone who delivers the devices will not survive. Admiral Price studied the holographic display. The plan could work, but it would require incredible courage from her people. She thought about the human crews who had already given their lives in this battle. How many devices would we need? At least 12, placed at specific points in their formation, Dr. Martinez said. That would disrupt their coordination long enough for us to launch a major attack. And how long would we have before they adapt and restore their connection? Maybe 30 minutes, maybe less. Admiral Price walked to the window and looked out at the battle zone. Human and Zephyrian ships were still fighting, still holding the line. She thought about the message they had received just hours ago from Federation Command. The Federation had finally decided to send help. but only after they realized the humans were actually winning. Admiral Price had rejected their offer. "We asked for your help when we needed it," she had told them. "Now we don't need it." "Admiral," Dr. Martinez said, "there's something else you should know. We've intercepted communications from the main Devourer fleet. They're planning one final massive attack. If we don't stop them soon, they'll bring in so many ships that nothing will be able to stop them." Admiral Price turned back to the group. "When do they attack?" "Tomorrow, at dawn. Then we need to act tonight." "Veltar, how quickly can your people build these devices?" "We can have them ready in 6 hours." Admiral Price activated her communicator. "All senior officers report to the UES Defiance immediately. We're planning the final battle." 3 hours. Later, the command room was filled with the surviving officers of the human fleet. Captain Roy Bennett, one of the most experienced combat pilots, sat next to Captain Linda Walsh, who commanded a heavy cruiser. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Turner, whose ship had been damaged but was still fighting, studied the tactical plans. "Here's the situation," Admiral Price began. "We have one chance to break the enemy's coordination. It will require 12 ships to fly directly into their formation and activate electromagnetic pulse devices. It's a one-way mission." The room was silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Captain Bennett spoke first. "I volunteer for the mission, Admiral." "So do I," said Captain Walsh. "And me," added Lieutenant Colonel Turner. Within minutes, all 12 volunteers had been chosen. These were some of the best officers in the human fleet, people with families and futures waiting for them back on Earth, but they understood what was at stake. "Are you sure about this?" Admiral Price asked each volunteer privately. Captain Bennett answered for all of them. "Admiral, if we don't do this, the Devourers will destroy the Zephyrians and then come for humanity. Our families will never be safe. This is our chance to end the threat forever." The electromagnetic pulse devices were loaded onto 12 human ships. The plan was simple but dangerous. The 12 volunteers would approach the enemy fleet from different directions, making it harder for the Devourers to stop all of them. They would activate the devices simultaneously, disrupting the enemy's coordination. Then the main human and Zephyrian fleet would attack with everything they had. As the volunteer ships prepared to launch, Admiral Price spoke to the entire fleet. "Today, 12 of our people are going to give their lives to save millions of others. They represent the best of humanity. They show the galaxy what we truly are." Captain Walsh's voice came over the communications from her ship. "Admiral, tell the people back home that we did our duty. Tell them we saved our friends." "I will, Captain, I promise." The 12 ships launched into space, flying toward the massive Devourer fleet. Admiral Price watched on her tactical display as they approached the enemy formation. The Devourers detected them and began firing, but the human ships were fast and unpredictable. "First device activated," came Captain Bennett's voice. "Second device activated," reported Lieutenant Colonel Turner. One by one, the electromagnetic pulse devices were activated. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Devourer ships suddenly stopped moving in coordination. They began colliding with each other, their perfect formation breaking apart. "All ships, this is Admiral Price. Attack now. For humanity and for our friends." The combined human and Zephyrian fleet charged into the confused enemy formation. Without their coordination, the Devourers were just individual ships, powerful but no longer invincible. The battle that followed was fierce but brief. When it was over, the Devourer fleet was scattered and broken. Many had been destroyed, and the rest were fleeing back toward the edge of the galaxy. Admiral Price stood on her bridge, looking out. At the victory her people had won. The cost had been terrible, but they had saved the Zephyrians and shown the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for. Admiral Helen Price stared at the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The news was spreading fast. Humanity had defeated the Devourers at Zephyria Prime, but the war was not over. The main enemy fleet was still out there, regrouping in the empty space between star systems. "Admiral, we're receiving messages from Federation Command," Commander Steve Harrison reported. They want to take control of the combined fleet. Admiral Price felt anger rise in her chest. What did you tell them? I told them to wait for your response. 3 days had passed since the battle at Zephyria Prime. The human fleet had been reinforced by Zephyrian ships and volunteers from other species who had been inspired by human courage, but Admiral Price knew the real fight was still coming. Put Federation command on the main screen, she ordered. The familiar face of Council Leader Vorthek appeared. He was a tall, thin alien with cold eyes who had always looked down on humanity. Admiral Price, the Federation Council has decided to take command of all military operations in this region. You will transfer control of your fleet to Federation Admiral Zextai immediately. I don't think so, Admiral Price replied calmly. Vorthak's eyes widened. Excuse me? You had your chance to help when it mattered. You chose to abandon our friends? Now we'll finish what we started. You cannot defy the Federation Council. Watch me. Admiral Price cut the communication. Admiral Kethver, the Zephyrian commander, appeared on another screen. His ancient face showed both sadness and determination. Admiral Price, my people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. But I must ask one more favor. What is it, Admiral? Our scientists have discovered where the main Devourer fleet is hiding. They're gathering in the Void sector, preparing for one final attack. If they succeed, they will have enough power to consume our entire galaxy. Admiral Price studied the star charts. The Void sector was a region of empty space between galaxies. It was the perfect place for the Devourers to hide and plan their next move. How many ships do they have? Our scouts report over 10,000 vessels. Far more than our combined fleet. Admiral Price looked at her tactical displays. The human Zephyrian Alliance had maybe 3,000 ships left. The odds were terrible, but she had learned something important over the past few days. Sometimes the right cause was more important than the odds. Admiral Kethver, do your scientists know how the Devourers travel between galaxies? Yes, they use something called quantum tunneling. It allows them to create doorways through space itself. Can this ability be destroyed? Kethver paused. Our best scientist, Dr. Veltar, believes it might be possible. But it would require destroying their dimensional anchor, a massive device at the center of their fleet. Admiral Price felt a plan forming in her mind. If we destroy this anchor, what happens to them? They would be trapped in our galaxy, cut off from their home dimension. Without reinforcements, they could be defeated. But someone would have to get close enough to destroy it. Yes, very close. It would be another suicide mission. Admiral Price thought about the brave men and women who had already given their lives in this war. Captain Bennett, Captain Walsh, Lieutenant Colonel Turner, and so many others. They had died believing that their sacrifice would save others. How long do we have before they attack? 2 days, maybe 3. Admiral Price called a meeting of all senior officers from both human and Zephyrian fleets. The conference room on the UES Defiance was crowded with the best military minds from 2 civilizations. Here's what we're going to do, Admiral Price began. We're going to attack the main Devourer fleet in the Void sector. Captain Nancy Ford looked shocked. Admiral, our scouts report they have 10,000 ships. We have 3,000. I know the numbers, Captain, but we have something they don't expect. What's that? We have Dr. Frank Russell's new discovery. Admiral Price activated a holographic display showing the work of the Chief Science Officer. Dr. Russell has found a way to create a quantum disruption bomb. If we can get it close enough to their dimensional anchor, it will sever their connection to their home dimension permanently. Dr. Russell, a quiet man who rarely spoke in meetings, stood up. The device will work, but the ship carrying it will have to get very close to the anchor. The explosion will destroy everything within 100 kilometers. Admiral Price looked around the room. I need a volunteer. Captain Linda Walsh raised her hand. Admiral, my ship is already damaged from the last battle. Let me take it. Captain Walsh, you've already risked your life once. That's exactly why I should do it again. I know what we're fighting for. As the meeting ended, Admiral Price received an unexpected message. President Carolyn Webb appeared on her personal communication screen. Admiral, I've been following your progress. The entire human population is proud of what you've accomplished. Thank you, Madam President, but we're not finished yet. I know. I also know that you're planning something dangerous. I want you to know that whatever you decide, you have the complete support of Earth and all human colonies. Madam President, if this mission fails, humanity will be defenseless. President Webb smiled. Admiral, if this mission fails, there won't be anything left to defend. You're fighting for the survival of our entire galaxy. 2 days later, the combined human Zephyrian fleet approached the Void Sector. The sight that greeted them was terrifying. 10,000 Devourer ships filled the empty space, their dark hulls twisted into unnatural shapes. At the center of the formation was the Dimensional Anchor, a massive structure that pulsed with evil energy. All ships, this is Admiral Price. Today we end this threat forever. For humanity, for the Zephyrians, and for every species that believes in freedom. The battle began with a coordinated attack from 3 directions. Human fighters, led by the survivors of Captain Ford's squadron, dove between the enemy ships. Zephyrian cruisers used their advanced weapons to create gaps in the Devourer formation. Captain Walsh's ship, the UES Vengeance, approached the Dimensional Anchor from below. The quantum disruption bomb was armed and ready. Admiral Price, this is Captain Walsh. I'm beginning my final approach. Good luck, Captain. Admiral, tell my family back on Earth that I love them. Tell them I did something that mattered. The UES Vengeance flew straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Devourer ships fired everything they had at the small human vessel, but Captain Walsh's skill and determination carried her through. I'm at the target, she reported. Activating the quantum disruption bomb now. The explosion that followed was visible across the entire battle zone. A brilliant white light expanded outward from the Dimensional Anchor, destroying everything. Nearby, when the light faded, the anchor was gone. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate. Cut off from their home dimension, their ships began to lose power. The twisted creatures that controlled them started to die without the energy that sustained them. All ships, attack now, Admiral Price ordered. They're vulnerable. The final battle was swift and decisive. Without their dimensional anchor, the Devourers were just dying ships and failing technology. The combined fleet destroyed them systematically, ensuring that none would escape to threaten the galaxy again. When it was over, Admiral Price stood on her bridge and looked out at the stars. The Void Sector was quiet now, filled only with the wreckage of the enemy fleet. Admiral, Commander Harrison reported, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. The news is spreading. The Devourer threat is ended. Admiral Price smiled. Send a message to Earth and all human colonies. Tell them we won. Tell them the galaxy is safe. Years later, the galaxy would remember this as the moment when humanity proved they belonged among the stars. Not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of their courage and their refusal to abandon their friends, the human Zephyrian alliance became the foundation for a new kind of galactic government, one based on mutual respect and the protection of all species. Admiral Price, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, commanded ships that carried a simple message throughout the galaxy. When someone calls for help, we answer, and they always did.